Welcome back to Real Estate Success Partner. I'm your host, Devin Dubuc, and I've got returning co-host Dom Arias from Premier Lending. And Dom, man, you're in the place to be. You know, today you're not there. You're in California, but you're right there in the heartland, Nebraska, Lincoln, and you've got another banger of a guest today. Who'd you bring along?
Yeah, I'm super excited for this one. So today I brought along one of the top agents from the top team in Nebraska and one of the top teams in the nation, Mr. Eric Bibins. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Man, we're super excited to have you here today and take that time out of your busy schedule. I know, as a top agent, you're always in demand, especially Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. That always seems to be, the busy day. We shoot on Fridays, so we're stealing away some of your time today, man. So thanks for being here.
No worries. I like to carve out a little bit of time to run my mouth. So,
well, you run it well. So let's get out there and let's talk about all the cool stuff you're doing. So we know you're in Lincoln. Is that where you're from originally?
No, sir. I grew up in Bellevue, actually. So both of my parents were military. So I grew up just off of the Air Force Base. Shout out to all of my Air Force people there. I moved to Lincoln probably 10 or 11 years ago.
Very cool. Very cool. So being a military kid, did you move around a lot, or were you always stationed right there in Nebraska?
I was one of the few that didn't actually have to move around a lot. Both of my parents were active duty. My dad was a air traffic controller, and there's not a lot of vacancies for those out there. So, they had to bounce around a lot, but as a family, we didn't really move. We stayed put.
Great. Yeah. So you grew up there. Your roots are from Nebraska.
Absolutely. Bleed Husker Red.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Go Big Red, baby.
So, how'd you get over to the real estate states, right? Like, did you just wake up one day and you're like, man, I am dying to be a realtor? Like, what was it? What got you over here?
I wasn't one of those that woke up thinking about real estate. No. So a good friend of mine, a guy I used to live with back in college, he started a real estate group and was doing that for a while here. I was in medical. I was working at a heart hospital at the time. One random day, he gave me a call. He said, "Hey, Eric, you should stop by my office on your way home from work." I did that, and he just kind of ran me through what he was doing and what his goals were for the real estate team, and kind of talked to me about how I could plug in and help out with that. So, I just took the leap, and here we are today.
So you went from saving lives to saving bar homeowners, right? Or trading homeowners, right?
So to speak, for sure.
I love it, man. I love it. So yeah, definitely not trained in this industry, but you're doing some great things for people. And I think we talked about this in the green room, before we jumped on the podcast. I also spent a little time at the heart hospital several years ago. So, I just want to say thank you, and all the great people up there at the heart hospital, for what you guys do, man. That's super important to me. And it's part of the reason why I'm actually here having this podcast with you today. So, you guys are heroes, man. And I want to, extend my gratitude for that. So
I was really lucky to work hand in hand with some amazing people, some amazing doctors, some amazing nurses. There's a lot of roles in a hospital that don't really get the thank yous. So, I know firsthand how that goes. So yeah, I was lucky to spend that time there.
That's awesome, man. So you come over to the real estate space, and what was that like? Like, how'd you transition in?
It was it was a learning experience, to say the least. I started off as an inside sales agent. So basically what my job was is all of the people that visited our website, I was making calls to them. I would set appointments for the agents on our team, and pass those people off to them, and they would actually close the deal. So I started doing that. I got my start on the phones. I came to learn that was one thing that a lot of agents did not like to do. That was not their forte. And so that was all I did for almost 2 years before I even, branched off and started to, sell on my own. So I kind of got the groundwork. I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to, set appointments and get people face to face with agents, which honestly, I think that's probably the hardest part of this
That's
job
true.
is doing that and doing that at a consistent level. So, after that transition, I kind of, got out from behind the desk and started meeting people, and I just grew and learned more each day.
So you had a bit of a mentorship program, and I think that's great because, at the end of the day, you've got to know how to manage the clients and provide them the right service. And sometimes even though we want to start off front facing, it's also great to be able to learn from other people so that when you start representing these clients, you already have the know-how, you've already got the skill set, and that's really what you did before you jumped right over in the market. You learned the basics so that you were prepared to hit the market and serve your clients well.
Absolutely, absolutely. We stress that very, very highly on the team that I'm a part of. Dialogue is something that we literally practice every morning, and we have an hour training every week, just role playing and going through different scenarios and how to handle them. Whether you're face to face, whether you're negotiating, whether you're going over inspection stuff, or calling for sale by owners or calling expireds. We just know how important that dialogue is. And honestly, the confidence that you get from practicing that dialogue just translates to every part of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Practice builds confidence so that when you hit the market, you're not green, you're
Absolutely.
seasoned at that point in time
Absolutely.
and you're ready, and that's so important. Preparation, to provide, the best service is so important. I talk about this all the time with our team because, you look at any trained athlete, right? And, some of them sure have some raw talent, but they never rise to their full potential if they're not out there going through the basics, learning the motions and getting the muscle memory down so that when they're faced with the situation, they know exactly how to handle it. And it sounds like your team does that very well. They're preparing you to get out there into the marketplace.
100%. It's funny that you brought athletes into it because that's exactly how I look at it as well. Steph
Mhm.
Curry misses how many shots in practice so that on game day he can go out and hit the shots that he needs to. And that's what it's like for us. I would rather fail in front of a colleague role playing than fail in front of a client and miss out on, you know, thousands of dollars or helping that
Yeah.
client find that next house.
Well, I think that's important
For
too
sure.
because, there's so many different elements to this industry, making sure that you're understanding the right properties and but B, like how to negotiate for that client, right? How to make sure that that client's being put in the best position. And that's where having an A player on your team comes in so handy, right? And you guys are back there in the background getting yourself prepared for that battlefield because it really is a battlefield, right? Like at the end of the day, it's hey, we're entering negotiations, right? Who do
Absolutely.
you want negotiating for you? You want somebody that's doing the practice and putting in the work and getting out there and knows how to have these conversations to get the best opportunity for their client, whether that's the buyer or the seller.
100%. I mean, you're not wrong at all. I think learning to talk to your clients and dig down to their true motivation is a
Amen.
huge factor there. I think knowing that will help you in those negotiations, but also the relationships that you have with the public, the relationships that you have with vendors and other agents are going to help you there as well. I strive to be an agent that can be extremely approachable. I love to have really good communication. Sometimes it seems like a battlefield, but also it can be a partnership. Me and you, as the other agent, are working together to accomplish the same goal for our clients. And sometimes, if that's the best way to get the deal done, that's the best way to get the deal done. We don't necessarily have to be on opposing ends all the time, but there are transactions where you have to be on opposite ends and you're fighting for your client, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah. No, but I love that you said that, man, because it is, it's great to have partners. And I think that's another thing that people need to take into consideration when they're working with an agent or even an originator is there's partnerships inside of this business that you don't know about, right? It's no different than let's say that you get yourself in a little bit of trouble and you got to hire an attorney, right? Do you want to hire an attorney that spends a little time hanging out with the judge? Or do you
Right.
want to hire the attorney that's brand new to the market and doesn't have all the relationships, right? Now, we're not saying that other attorney can't do a great job defending you, but at the end of the day, if they've got a relationship with the other parties, man, does that help during negotiation time? And that's what you're talking about is if you're forming partnerships with some of these other agents, it's a lot easier to go through the negotiations because you guys already know how you guys work together. You know
Hmm.
how to communicate with one another, and you know how to come out of this thing to best represent both of your clients, right?
Absolutely. 100%. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about this, man. So, you're out there having great success. And how long have you been doing this?
So this will be year three as a full-time agent. I started off my career as an inside sales agent. I worked a lot behind the scenes on our real estate team, helping with accountability for some of our agents, helping train some of our agents. And then my team owner said, "Man, I feel like we're holding you back, keeping you inside here. You should go out and start getting your own business going." And so this is year three for me. I learned a lot year one. I learned a lot again year two, and I
Yeah.
just hit the ground running year three.
Yeah, well, I've seen your production report, man, and you're doing amazing for a 3-year agent, and I'll tell you what, it goes back to all that preparation, and I think that's where, you definitely got it right. It's because sometimes we want to jump in and just go, no, I got this, right?
Mhm.
But you took the time, you studied the market, you studied the business so that, when you went out there, you were able to hit the ground running. You didn't have to have some of the same growing pace that others do. And you picked the right agency, right?
Yep,
Like,
I did.
a
I
lot
did
of it has to do with the team that you're on. I can tell you guys are, you're a well-oiled machine, right?
for
And
sure.
there's a lot of seasoned veterans in here that are helping lead people, to the right direction. So
Absolutely. I look at it as, if you're starting off playing basketball, you don't start at the 3-point line. You start with the layups, you start with some of the foundations to the game. And I
Mm.
think, being forced to be on the phones, right out the gate, that's just the foundation. One thing that I've learned so far is, people can generate business in a lot of different ways and spend a lot of money, to generate business. But unless you're good at conversations, you can spend all the money in the world and not necessarily convert at a high level. So, just being really, really good at, getting business and having conversations with people. I think that learning that from the start just, put me in the right direction.
well, you learn how to listen, and that's really a big part of this industry is listening to your clients' needs and understanding what they really want so that you can help direct them in the right way. And
Absolutely.
I think that's on both sides of the table, right? From the real estate side or from the lending side. If you're really taking notes and understand your clients' pain points and their motivation factors, it really helps you to determine what the right solution is for them, right? And
So
then
true.
you can lead them, and then you can lead them to the right direction, and that's important. It's super important. So,
I hear
yeah,
that
I
word
love it.
motivation so much. Every training, every dialogue training, we're constantly talking about motivation. So yeah, you're 100% right. With that, you learn so much more, and being able to listen and also dig when you need to. Motivations change, and people are really good at giving a
That's true.
surface level motivation just to kind of get you off the phone and being there and knowing where to dig and knowing what questions to ask to get to that true motivation. That's the
Amen.
difference between finding someone's forever house and finding a house that they tolerate for 2 years and then they find another agent to sell that house to get into something else.
It's awesome, man. I heard I had an agent on a couple of weeks back, I think, and she was telling a story about a client that she knew what the motivational factor was. She knew what the client was looking for, and they looked at a lot of houses, and the client was actually starting to get a little bit wore down, and almost made the sacrifice of taking a house that they didn't want, and she stopped and said, "No, you know, this isn't the house that you want. I know it's not. I know what you're looking for, and this isn't the one." And she said that there was like 2 houses away from finding the perfect one. And she said they walked in that house and she said, this is what you told me. You wanted to be able to have this open kitchen where the family gets in and you could cook your dinner and have the holiday and have everybody here in the backyard. This is your home, right? Like this is your home. And that's if you're listening to your clients' needs and understand what they're really looking for, that's how you help lead them to that right property. And this is something else that we talk about all the time. And Dom knows this. We literally talk about it every single Thursday because Thursday is when we call our pre-approved and lookings, right? And one of the things we do is we use those motivating factors to remind the client, like why they got excited about getting back out in the market, right? And we use it to basically, future cast, hey, let's get you out there and find that perfect house this week. I know it's really important for Bobby to get his own room, or I know it's really important for you guys to get that pool so you can enjoy the summertime,
Right.
and do the barbecue out there. Man, I can smell it cooking, So, we always like to touch on those motivating factors because sometimes when you start getting out there looking for properties, you start to forget the reason you even wanted to do it in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
you can get a little defeated in some of these markets, right? Where it's not happening the way you want it to. You're not finding that perfect house right on the starting gate and having that confidence to be able to say, hey, look, remember what we're doing this for,
Absolutely.
remember why we want to get you there. Let's get you home. Let's get you to that place you want to be, right?
Absolutely. No, 100%. I read a book, I read a couple of books, but one of them really focused on, finding the problem that people don't necessarily know that they have.
Yes.
And you do that through, conversation and listening and, just being able to take your expertise and what you know, take what they've told you, and then, eliminate some of those issues that they don't necessarily know they have yet. I
Yeah.
had a client that was kind of blending two families and into one Brady Bunch style almost. And we
Yeah.
went and looked at a split level house, and they loved it. It was recently updated. It was super super nice. And we go out to the car like I normally do, and they say, Eric, we love this house. I said, I could tell that you really really like it. But where's the Christmas tree going in February? And they're
Oh,
like, you know what? There wasn't that much storage there. I said, I know that storage was something that was really important to you. The finishes were really, really nice in this house. But, once the summer ends and you have to pack all the kids' summer clothes and put them somewhere, where is that place going to be? And they're like, you know what? This house isn't the one. It's one of those things I tell people all the time. My job is to take a little bit of the emotion out of it. I've seen a lot of homes, so I don't get awestruck like a lot of people that are
yeah,
actually
that's right.
looking for houses get. And sometimes that's my job, just to take the emotion out of it and get down to brass tacks. And you told me that this is what you want. Does this really check the boxes for you? And we ended up finding them something that worked out great, down the road. But it's just one of those things. I knew what their motivation and their pain point was. And,
Oh
just
man,
being there and bringing that up each house. Each house is going to bring its own pluses and minuses, and
that's right.
the storage in this particular house was just wasn't going to do it. And I knew it was going to be an issue for him.
Well, and I just want to say thank you. And what I mean by that is thank you for your integrity, right? Because at the end of the day, you had the integrity to step up and say that there's a lot of people that would have written that contract, closed that door, and not worried at all about what the client's true needs were, right? And Eric, that's what sets you apart from the competition. That's a big part of the reason why you're having so much success in this industry. And you should be proud of that, right? You should be proud that you didn't let them make a decision that maybe would have turned out to be a mistake. So we need more people out there like you, brother. And I have to say thank you because I've been in situations personally, where ended up making a decision that didn't check my boxes, or more importantly, work with somebody that didn't even ask me what I was really looking for. They basic needs. Oh, you need a few bedrooms and a backyard, but it wasn't like, what do you have to have in this house? It was funny because I remember moving into that home and I was like, man, I really wish that we had this, and I wish we had that, and I wish we had this. And guess what the next house had?
All of those
All of
things.
it,
All of it.
yeah.
All those things. So, well, what would you tell people out there right now, in the Lincoln marketplace? Because that's where we're at, right? And to be specific, I don't know exactly when this will air, but we're in the May 16th is recording date. So I'd imagine this is going to come out sometime by the end of the month or early June. What's going on out there? What's happening in the Lincoln marketplace?
It's still moving. It's still moving. We're always keeping an eye on rates. Rates are one of the biggest make or break things right now. I feel like when I'm talking to a lot of new buyers, but it's a matter of finding what you're looking for and using some of the tools that a lot of lenders have to get into something that you like. I
There you go.
literally just showed a house maybe 30 or 45 minutes before jumping on here, and they were offering $10,000 in credits to buy down rates. So,
Mm,
that's still an option that's out there for people.
selling concessions.
Absolutely, absolutely. Using that to get your mortgage payment where you want it for a couple of years, and if rates do end up coming down here in the near future, just refinancing at that new rate. That is absolutely always an option. Um, People are getting houses under contract with inspections. A few years ago, we weren't necessarily seeing that. So,
Yeah.
buyers do have the ability to be choosy, to be picky and choosy with what they're finding right now. Good agents and great agents are out there, writing things into offers to take care of their buyers and get them the inspections that they want. So it is possible. People are buying houses. The market's still relatively hot. Things are selling quickly. It's a fun market to be a part of if you're an agent. And I'm always looking for buyers to work with. I have a few, and I always looking for more.
Well, and let's talk real quick about financial literacy, right? You mentioned, buy down of rates, sometimes using seller concessions as an opportunity to do that. Dom, you're in the lending side of the business. What opportunities are there out right now to make homes affordable in a what people are calling a high rate economy? I don't think it's a high rate market, to be 100% with you. Just before we touch on that, because I've been in this industry, dating back to 2002, and when I first got in, refi boom at 6.5, right? And where we at today, we're around 6.5. But it doesn't change the fact that it feels high because we had the perfect storm, right?
For
Rates went
sure.
up from a really, really low price point. But in addition to that, home prices value went up as well. And in a lot of markets, income went down. So, that's why I think it really feels difficult right now. But there are solutions, Dom. So what are some of the solutions out there right now that you could use some of those seller concessions for, or even ones where you don't need them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, Eric, you made a good point, and you said like buyers have the ability to be choosy. And you think about on the other side, like you have the sellers, and sometimes, they might be more readily like able to give those seller concessions out because a lot of people, they think, oh, I just want to drop this purchase price down 10,000. But how about instead of doing that, it's actually more financially smart to take that 10,000 and do what you just said, like do it towards buying down the rate. So you can go from your average rate of like 6.5 and you can get into the fives, and that's going to save you month over month, like triple the amount that it would then you're taking, 10K off the purchase price. But then even that, like even if they aren't, selling or offering seller concessions, like buyers can still get in, at really affordable rates, with zero down payment, through DPA programs, through NIFA. We have an in-house at Arrive program, so there's a lot of options and there's just a lot of flexibility right now in the market.
Yeah, and 2-1 buy downs, right? You've got
hmm
buy down options as well.
hmm
And these are things that allow for you to get in a really low introductory rate, and it will move up over the following preceding years. But if the market transitions, which it will happen at some point in time, right? It may not happen in 2025. We've been talking about this for 2 years, and it's like 2024 is going to be the year rates are going to drive. And they drove down a little bit and then they went right back up, right? And now, I think our current, president has a big job to do, whether you like him, love him, or hate it. It doesn't change the fact there's a big job to do. Are rates going to come down this year? I don't know. Is inflation going to come down this year? Right? Because at the end of the day, until those things come in alignment, we're probably not going to see rates improve, but they will improve at some point in time, right? And when they do, you can refinance that. So a buy down option, even if it's a temporary buy down, is a great solution for somebody that needs to get in now and have that flexibility to be able to purchase at a price point that makes sense to them, and then utilizing some of those seller concessions, right? And being able to select the property. I think that was another big issue that we ran into just a few years back, right? Was people were out there, overbidding on properties, and you had a lot of people going after the same houses. So when you wanted to find that perfect home, you didn't always get it. In fact, the person with the most attractive offer was the one that was winning. And sometimes that attractive offer was cash, right? So, you got to think about that. If you are somebody who's interested in purchasing when other people are not, a lot of the times that's a great time to buy a house.
Really is. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, I was out there when, we were seeing 15, 20 offers on the same house. Houses were selling 40, 50, $60,000 over list price. There was a lot of buyer fatigue going on at that time. You were showing house after house after house. And if you didn't have a cash buyer, it was really, really tough to get that person under contract. So it's kind of refreshing for me as an agent to be in a market where we actually have the opportunity to see one or three houses and get under contract then in and have inspections and negotiate repairs and all of those things, because about 3 years ago we weren't necessarily seeing that at all. You were having to write appraisal gaps in there. You were having to write no inspections. There was a lot of things that people were
Right.
not doing to get their house, and sadly it was by house 10, 11, or 12 instead of one or two. So you could
Mhm.
really tell that we had some buyers that were just kind of settling. This is the one that we could get. There's not as many things that we have to go in there and change, and they're staying put for a while. The great thing about Lincoln, though, houses appreciate really, really well here.
Yeah,
So even
Absolutely.
even if you did purchase at that time, you probably still have some really good appreciation year 3, 4, 5 being into that home. So if you do decide to sell to get something more of what you want, you're making some money there. But yeah, the market now is is a lot
Yeah.
better than
Well, let's talk about that too, Eric, because a lot of those buyers bought a house they don't love.
yeah.
They got a great rate on it, but they're not happy with the home. They are getting appreciation, which is fantastic, as you mentioned. But let's talk about that appreciation, right? So the people are holding off right now in a market where they can potentially negotiate simply because the interest rates are, higher than what they want them to be, or it makes it not quite as affordable as it once was. What's going to happen to that property in the next 12 months?
They're gonna spend more,
It's going
and
to go up
that's
in price.
that's something
It's
that
going to go up in price.
I talk about that a lot too. When I'm talking to new buyers, I hear a lot of the time, we want to wait, we want to wait.
Yeah.
Sometimes just putting
The
that to a
cost of
dollar
waiting.
amount,
Yeah.
putting that to a dollar amount is really effective when talking to those people. Sometimes, you can look at a $200,000 house now. Next year, that house might be 220. That house might
10,000. Yeah.
be 230. We don't know. The one thing we do know is year after year we're continuing to appreciate here. So you
That's
might
it.
have to overspend next year for that $200,000 house now.
Well, I think it's even more than that, right? Because effectively, average appreciation is about 5.5% a year in most markets. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but at the end of the day, that's average, right? So you talk about that $200,000 house. Well, it's very likely that it goes up 10, 12, $15,000 over the next 12 months. But then what happens? Well, let's say the rates drop, and let's say they go down a
Yep.
point, and that inspires everybody to come back to the market. Well, guess what? It inspired everybody to come back to the market. So the house already went up from 200 to 215, and now you've got 25 bidders on that same property, some of them coming in and saying, "Hey, I'll pay an extra 20K over because I really want this house." Now that $215,000 house become a $235,000 house, all because you got a little better interest rate. Where the client that purchased now leveraged the seller's position by getting them to contribute to doing a buy down on their interest rate. They start to enjoy the appreciation of the property as it goes up 5.5% over the next year. They've made $15,000, right? And in addition to that, now they refinance while everybody else bids over the house they don't want, right? So at the end of the day, there's a cost of waiting. And if you're in the market, when's the best time to buy?
It's
When
always now.
everybody else isn't.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
that's it.
also to throw another wrinkle in there, there's something that we haven't really had to deal with before. But let's say in a year, when you're looking to get that house that everybody's competing on, how about three of those offers say, you know what, we're going to pay our agent? Then you have to worry about having the money out of pocket to pay your
Mhm.
buyer's agent if
True.
everybody else is going to be paying their buyer's agent. So that can
Mhm.
add another 4 or 5 grand on top of what you're already having to spend out of pocket. So yeah, you're 100% right. You never know what the market is going to be doing. If you decide to wait until next May, May is one of our busiest periods. You're going to see a lot of people competing for houses, especially in the 200 to $250,000 range for
Yeah.
sure.
So do you want to spend 200 now or 230 later,
Mhm.
all to save, a couple $100 a month that, quite frankly, can be refinanced at the same time when everybody else comes to market. So, man, I think we leave off on that because I know I can't keep you here all day, Eric, but what did we not cover today that we should have?
We covered a lot. I do want to say that we talked a lot of dollars and cents. We talked a lot of numbers, but in there, those are their families. I
Yeah,
spent
I
years
bet.
working in the service industry. I've spent years helping people, and that's something that I still continue to get to do every day. I'm making people's dreams come true. I'm helping people start families. I'm helping people build wealth. And that's never lost on me. So as much as I love to geek out and talk numbers and inventory and all of
It's
that
about the
stuff,
people.
it's always been about the people. And I don't want that to be forgotten in this conversation. It's one of my favorite things to do is talk to people, and I'm helping them in a way that, I never dreamed that I would be able to help people. And I love what I do.
I can feel it, man. I feel the passion. And it's, something I talk about all the time too is, a lot of people say, the house is the biggest purchase in most people's lives, and it is, but it's way more than that. It's your home.
Mhm.
It's where you're going to live. It's where you're going to break bread. It's where you're going to have your happy moments and your sad moments. And at the end of the day, Eric, you get to be a part of that journey. Dom, you get to be a part of that journey. I get to be a part of that journey. And that's what makes this industry so darn special, man. It's helping the people.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen. Well, Eric, what market do you serve? Are you Nebraska, I assume? You're
Yep.
Lincoln?
Lincoln,
Pacific?
Omaha, some of those cities
Lincoln,
that are
Omaha.
in between. Yep, that's me.
There it is, man. And when the folks out there want to find you, how do they find Eric Bibins?
Eric at lincolnselect.com is my email. My phone number, 402-707-1452. I do have Instagram. It's Eric Bibins, at Eric Bibins on Instagram. I'm posting a lot of movie stuff and housing stuff and all that's in between. So, yeah, they
My
can
man.
find me there. Always hoping to chat with some new people.
Well, do me a favor, guys. If you're watching this right now and you're not driving, run over to that and you can find that. It probably just ran across the screen or it's in the description, and go and follow Eric. And you're going to be glad you did, man. He's out there providing financial literacy. He's showing you, how to become a homeowner, and you might have some fun while you're on the page as well. So make sure you go over there and follow him right now. Go do it right now. So, Dominic, my man. So you're out there. So Dominic's in California. He's about to hit the beach. What you guys don't know is he's wearing board shorts underneath his sport coat today.
Don't drop that camera. He's wearing shorts.
You can't expose me like that, man.
So you're going to see him run out that back door because he's going to hit the beach as soon as we finish up here. But Dom, you're not normally in California. You're typically in Lincoln as well. And what all markets do you serve?
Yeah, no. So I do anywhere in Nebraska, Lincoln, Omaha, anywhere in between. Small city. I have one in Beatrice, but I also do Iowa, our neighbor state, because Council Bluffs is obviously super close to Omaha. But then, where I'm at right now, California, it's where I grew up. So I got my license here, so I service people here in California. And then you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. My Instagram handle is probably my most popular. It's the Dom Arias, or you can just give me a call at 531-220-2408.
There it is. And same thing with Dom. Go over there and follow this guy. I'm telling you again, both of these two, they're all over social. And, if you want to know what's going on in that Lincoln market, you're going to be able to find it with Eric and Dom. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time today out of your busy schedules. Eric's a little more busy than Dom's. He's just being lazy on the beach. And so I'm gonna keep giving you trouble, man. No, you deserve it, man. You're one of the hardest working people I know. So, but thanks again, guys, for stopping in. And if you made it this far, hey, make sure you like and comment here. And if you haven't followed, you better start following. Hey, and also take this podcast or this snippet clip, whatever you're on right now, and share it with the 3 people that need to hear it today. Let's make sure we're getting that done. But I think we've done our job here today, guys. Dom, get to the beach. Eric, you and I can get back to work. And until the next time, we'll see you then.
Surf's up.